I think it's safe to say that most cultures or nations have some semi-legendary historical figure they revere. Washington for the Americans, Alfred for the English, Skanderbeg for the Albanians, etc. Well, the Mirans have one too, their unifier and founder Negeb. Today, we'll explore the chronology of his conquest, as well as his early life and how he got to where he did. First, some basic info. Negeb the Unifier was finished on November 28th, 2019, as my 18th story. It's not the first story about some historical figure I wrote about, and it's not the last by a long shot, but Negeb is certainly more important and influential than the likes of Urin IV, Uparki, or Malplach. Oh, and this story actually has an in-world date. 26 GN to 47 LM is when this story takes place. For those of you who don't remember the calendar system, GN means before Negeb, and LM means Miran Age. So yeah, he's a pretty important dude. The cast for this video is fairly simple. There are 4 characters you need to know about, and they're all from the same family. Firstly, our boy Negeb. He, well, unifies, along with other pastimes like quelling rebellions and being an overall great guy. Second, his twin brother Upardu. There's not much to say about him other than the fact that he's with Negeb for most of his life. The two are kind of inseparable, being twins and all. Third and fourth are the twins' parents, Hokau and Pohud. Definitely Pohud. So, with that out of the way, let's run through this story. We start in Tishar, the easternmost of the 9 cities of the Nuke, while the god Cheka is walking around disguised as a mortal man inspecting the temples. While he's doing this, he sees a beautiful girl across the street and approaches her. She asks his name, and he says Pohud. For those of you who are proficient in the early Nucrian language, you'll notice that the name comes from the verb pohuda, which has the oddly specific meaning of to conceal with the intent of revealing the concealed at a later date. The two go out and eventually marry, with Pohud revealing his true identity the night before the wedding. Great timing, if I do say so myself. It only turns Hokau's world completely upside down. Anyway, after Cheka recounts various myths in extremely vivid detail, Hokau believes him and they get married. The story then fast forwards to the birth of Negeb and Upardu, who spent the first part of their lives in poverty, since Hokau came from a poor family and couldn't really make a whole lot of money herself. Apparently, neither could Cheka. So, one night, Hokau says to Cheka, "If you're really a god, why don't you pull some money out of thin air so our children can eat?" Cheka simply says, "I'm not the god of money, but my cousin Lidam Nur could probably help us out." After talking with him that night in Omet, Cheka returns with the good news that his cousin will raise them from poverty. The effect isn't immediate, but one day Tishar's king Weakness III awards Pohud for being an especially devout citizen and an outstanding member of the temple congregation. From then on, Cheka's family is pretty close with the king, and since the king has no male heir, he treats Cheka and Hokau's sons like his own. He showers the family in wealth, and they more or less become aristocrats. At this point in the story, the narrative takes a short break to bring you up to speed. See, Negeb and Upardu found all this out because they were eavesdropping on their parents. At the time, they were probably in their early teens, and they were totally unaware that they were half divine. Negeb almost opened his parents' bedroom door after hearing his father claim to be a god, but Upardu held him back and they listened to their father tell the whole story of how he and Hokau met, and everything since then. When Cheka exited the room, his sons bowed to him. Back to the narrative, the family is living the high life for a few years before disaster strikes. Tasben sends a plague through Tishar, killing Hokau. Understandably, Cheka is pretty miffed, and he returns to Omet to raise his dead wife to goddess status after Aule judges her, swearing vengeance on Tasben. This happens, and she becomes the first mortal to be afforded this privilege. When their mother dies, Negeb and Upardu are 15 years old. The next year, which would soon become 10 GN, the king himself dies, and Negeb is thrust into the public eye. It turns out that Old Weakness had written Negeb into his will as the future king of Tishar, so the 16-year-old takes the throne. I want to ask you something, dear viewers. What is the first thing you would do as king of a decently sized city? I'm genuinely curious, so leave your answers in the comments, but I'm sure most would want to stabilize their new polity and secure their hold on the throne. Well, Negeb kinda does that, but he also does the opposite. After acquiring the throne, he immediately embarks on a massive campaign to bring the other cities of the Nuke under his control, because his belief is that the plague was sent as a punishment for apostasy. He secures his hold on the throne by giving his subjects a common enemy, but he also risks losing it by getting himself an enemy. Or rather, 8 of them. So, 10 years later, Negeb has conquered every city but one, Kuluz, the westernmost city on the Nuke. The text says that the forces under Negeb just about lost at Kuluz, only winning because there were more of them than Kuluz had. Kuluz's king Yamunnadur II comes out and begs his new overlord for mercy. Negeb is more than merciful. He allows the king to live and, at the insistence of his brother, gives Yamunnadur the title of Ramkil, which is the equivalent of the Egyptian pharaoh's vizier, his second in command. After that, Negeb goes all the way back to Tishar to be crowned with the Black Crown of Mira, a simple ring made of some unspecified black metal that he just plops on his head. There's also a band of silver around it in the middle. He then establishes Keshaw's first multi-city polity, Mira, which comes from the early Nucrian word for glory. This is why he is referred to as the father of civilization. There's only a short section about Negeb's reign over the newly founded Mira, but it mentions that he faces a couple rebellions, most notably in the city of Murid in 4 LM, and devotes half of his personal funds to combating apostasy in the kingdom, mostly in the form of building new temples, many of which were to his father. Negeb dies 47 years after he unifies the Nucrian city-states, having had 5 children with his wife Iulma. At the end of the text, it states that, since Negeb was half divine, he was raised to godhood by the priests of Mira after he died. The text states that this established a precedent for the next kings, and eventually it just became part of Miranist canon that the king would become a god upon death. That's about it for this video, so, as always, feel free to leave feedback in the form of comments down below. I hope you enjoyed, and see you all in the next one.